As soon as the couple moved into their new home, they discovered a terrifying thing. The couple across the street did not even close their curtains, starting intimate interactions right at home. Thomas watched with his blood pumping, praising the two for their incredible physical fitness. Pippa quickly interrupted him, saying that peeping was an immoral act. But although she said so with her mouth, her heart had long been unable to suppress the burning desire. So she sprayed perfume that night and changed into sexy pajamas. But just as she planned to have an intimate interaction with her husband, she found he had already fallen fast asleep. Pippa was too disappointed to sleep, but there was no better way at this moment. When going to work the next day, Pippa complained about the couple across the street to her colleague, and condemned her husband again, by the way. The colleague thought Pippa was too conservative, saying that the reason why the people opposite did not pull the curtains might be just for people to watch and to enjoy the passion brought by being peeped at. Since it was a sincere invitation from the people opposite, Pippa dismissed the doubts in her heart and began to enjoy the view together with Thomas. On this day, Julia was listening to music in the living room, but Seb suddenly suffered great pain and could not breathe smoothly, obviously choked by something in his trachea. The two shouted anxiously, trying to get Julia's attention, but the other party was completely immersed in the music, making the two lose their minds in anxiety as they wanted to call the emergency services to save him, completely forgetting the fact that they were peeping. Fortunately, before the emergency call went through, Julia discovered Seb's miserable state in time, but her rescue technique was wrong, making Pippa and Thomas very anxious as they watched. After a long period of struggle, Julia finally helped him take out the foreign object. Seeing Seb out of danger, they were even more excited than being reborn. The wonderful live reality show opposite quickly became Pippa's favorite pastime. Even if she got up to drink water at night, she would still watch it with great interest for a long time. This day, she found Julia traveling for business with her luggage, and a burst of secret joy actually grew in her heart. Looking at this situation, Julia was estimated not to come back for several consecutive days. Pippa simply became bolder, staring at Seb's body to admire it, and that strong, young body actually made Pippa feel unbearably hot. To watch more enjoyably, Pippa directly bought a telescope back. Who knew when she looked opposite, she found Seb actually brought back another woman. It turned out Seb was a photographer who always invited famous models to take photos at home, and then used the convenience of his duty to have relations with the girls who came to his door. Looking at the beautiful scene before her, Pippa suddenly got interested, and she began to tease Thomas. Soon, they began to linger by imitating the appearance of the opposite side. However, just when Pippa wanted more, Thomas actually failed very quickly. But Seb opposite had abundant physical energy, continuing to broadcast hard for Pippa. She held the telescope to watch endlessly, and even late at night she was still peeping with high expectations. The next day, the couple chatted with old friends and inevitably talked about peeping again. At this time, Pippa learned from Thomas's classmate that Thomas actually had the ability to install eavesdropping equipment. She kept pestering Thomas, insisting on asking the principle of remote eavesdropping. It turned out sound would bounce onto glass and produce vibrations, and as long as a laser pointer illuminated it, the sound could be captured according to the vibration frequency. Pippa suddenly became extremely excited, quickly begging Thomas to start taking action.
In order to do that, we'd have to bounce the beam back here.
Hearing him say so, Pippa had no better way for a moment. Fortunately, that night, Seb held a masquerade party at home, and Pippa and Thomas dressed up carefully, successfully mixing into Seb's room. Then, Pippa quietly glued a small mirror on a hidden place in the room. When the two returned home, they installed the eavesdropping equipment at the very first moment. Thinking of a more perfect viewing experience, they began to look forward to it. However, the content heard for the first time was a fierce quarrel that broke out between Seb and Julia. It turned out they were not just a couple, but an official husband and wife who got marriage certificates. And during the party just now, Seb stayed in the bathroom with another woman for more than an hour. But Seb not only did not admit his mistake, but pressed Julia's head and smashed it hard on the table. Pippa was too shocked to speak and lost interest in continuing to watch for a while. Who knew early the next morning, Julia came to the place where Pippa worked. Yesterday her glasses were smashed by Seb, so she could only come to the hospital where Pippa was to get a new pair. The two talked quite well and left contact information with each other when parting. At this time, Thomas was peeping alone at home and ran into Seb's another cheating incident. Really unable to bear it anymore, when Pippa came back, he immediately complained that Seb was a total scumbag. Because Pippa got to know Julia, she was in a state of excitement now. After hearing about this matter, she wanted to tell the other party about Seb's cheating. Thomas quickly advised her not to interfere in other people's lives, but Pippa stood on the moral high ground on the grounds of helping her close friend. Seeing that he could not persuade her, Thomas simply took his coat and went out. Pippa took the telescope and continued to observe the opposite side with great interest. She saw Julia change into sexy pajamas, but Seb could not arouse a single bit of interest in her. Not knowing for what purpose, Pippa completely could not hold back anymore, so she connected to Julia's printer and quietly sent a message to the other party. Julia came to the bathroom according to the instructions, and sure enough, found evidence of Seb's cheating in the trash can. Julia's emotions collapsed instantly, and regardless of who sent the message, she grabbed a knife and rushed into the bedroom, gesturing wildly at Seb on the bed. At this time, Thomas just came back and immediately wanted to call the police after seeing this scene. But Pippa quickly stopped him for fear of bearing the blame of peeping and instigating. The two were too nervous to breathe, following Julia's movements all the time. Fortunately, at the last moment, Julia finally could not bear to do it after all. But Pippa's cross-border behavior made Thomas smash the telescope in anger. The next day, both of them calmed down, thinking this matter would pass like this. But at this time, they suddenly found Julia actually ended her life with a knife last night. Thomas collapsed instantly, believing it was Pippa who caused this tragedy, and in a fit of anger, he packed up his things and planned to leave. For the next few days, Pippa always lived in a daze. When she saw the glasses made for Julia, she fell into even deeper guilt. So she dialed Julia's voicemail, keeping saying words of apology in the message. On Christmas Day, light snow fell, and Seb was in low spirits, seeming to miss his late wife. Pippa watched and began to fantasizing that she was accompanying Seb at this time. She saw Seb going to a bar to drink, so she followed him in without hesitation. But although she was careful, her tracks were still discovered by Seb. The other party came straight over to talk and kept praising her beauty. Seb had already had a few drinks first and talked about sad things as he spoke. He said it was precisely because of his job as a photographer that his wife frequently had misunderstandings. Pippa comforted him patiently and then accepted the invitation, agreeing to go to Seb's residence to take a few photos. Originally, it was just normal shooting, but Pippa gradually could not suppress her restless heart. After all, she had fantasized so many times, so this time Pippa took off her coat voluntarily. The two finally met honestly, and Pippa's fantasy was finally satisfied. She could not figure out why she completely fell, but just when the two were immersed in it, Thomas returned home with a bunch of flowers. He intended to apologize to Pippa, and seeing that she was not there, he casually took a bottle of drink from the refrigerator. He poured the drink to the little birds on the balcony, but at this moment, he saw the unsightly scene. After one night, Pippa dragged her tired body home, but just opening the door, she saw Thomas had ended his life, and grief made her extremely fragile for a moment. But only a moment later, the corner of her mouth turned up imperceptibly. Pippa held a funeral for Thomas, and was also a bit dizzy for the next few days. Less than a week later, she saw Seb's promotional poster, so Pippa put on makeup and went out. Pippa came to Seb's work exhibition, looking forward to admiring Seb's masterpiece. Just when she was confused, Julia actually walked out from the backstage. It turned out Julia was not dead at all, and was also the organizer of this photography exhibition. When she ordered the cover cloth to be uncovered, the works were actually all Pippa's photos. Not only her daily life, but also her naked appearance in front of Seb were all presented in front of all audiences. Under Julia's arrangement, Pippa's peeping actually became a social experiment to warn the world. Pippa could not bear the strong mental stimulation and fled the venue in a hurry. And Julia and Seb gained fame instantly, as they not only became guests of major interviews, but also took this opportunity to make a lot of money. Pippa threw a tantrum at home and then planned to move away from this sad place. But just when packing things, she found Thomas's favorite birds actually died. Seeing Julia waving to her proudly, Pippa suddenly thought of something. This day, a famous art gallery sent a bottle of red wine, and Seb and Julia celebrated immediately. The two just drank a cup, and a trace of guilt grew in Seb's heart, as in his view, their current dual harvest of fame and fortune was all because they caused Thomas's death. At this time, the printer sent a message again, with accusations against Julia and Seb written on it. Seb quickly used the lens to look high up, and sure enough, found Pippa's figure on the roof. The two rushed to chase all the way to the hospital where Pippa worked, blocking Pippa in the room and forcing her to ask why she was still continuing to peep. But Pippa said she was very sure that Seb and Julia poisoned Thomas and then hung him up with a rope to disguise a false appearance of hanging. Julia put on a winner's posture, not taking Pippa's grievance to heart at all. Just when she wanted to continue to quibble, she suddenly collapsed on the ground, and Seb's vision also began to blur, losing the strength to resist very quickly. A new couple moved into Pippa's apartment and soon discovered the room across the street. They saw Julia and Seb and started peeping with great interest. But when the two opposite turned back, their eyes became like this.